Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV 18 budget verdict. It is now time for the grand finale. Joining us here on the budget verdict stage, we have a power-packed lineup of the budget makers as well as key policy makers. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of the Niti Aayog, Parameshwaran Iyer. Mr. Iyer, could we have you join us on stage, please? Also with us, the chairman of the CBDT, Mr. Nitin Gupta. Mr. Gupta, could we have you join us on stage? The chairman of the CBIC, Mr. Vivek Johri, also here with us on the CNBC TV 18 budget verdict. Also with us, the DPIIT Secretary, Mr. Anurag Jain. Mr. Jain, could we have you join us on stage as well? And the MNRE Secretary, Mr. Bhupinder Singh Bhalla. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for joining us here at the CNBC TV 18 budget verdict. Appreciate your time and thank you for being here with us in the concluding session of the CNBC TV 18 budget verdict. Mr. Iyer, let me start by talking to you, and the microphone is right next to you, sir. When we last spoke, you said that you believe that this is a bottom-up budget. It's a budget that has delivered on the aspirations of every constituency across the country. What, to your mind, has been the biggest force multiplier as far as the budget announcements are concerned?
Well, I think there are a couple of things, Shireen. One, of course, is the huge investment in Capex, that huge increase of 10 lakh crores. In addition to that, the continuation for another year of the 50-year interest-free loan to states. So extending that and actually incentivizing the states as well to come in with their own Capex and attracting private investment. I think those are going to be key. But then if that's going to have huge positive spin-offs in terms of jobs, employment, etc. But the other part of the budget, which I think is equally important, is the thrust on the social sector. And that's pretty much where Niti Aayog is working with states under the State Support Mission, which was referenced by the Finance Minister yesterday, of taking development right down to the grassroots level. How can states create their own state institutes of transformation like Niti? How can they move from planning to development strategy and really take it down to the block level? And perhaps one of the most significant features of the budget was the focus on inclusion, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, PVTG. So this new mission which has been announced is actually for the tribal community, the bottom rung of the tribal community, 15,000 crores, 3-year in mission mode to provide basic services. I think that was a very, very significant announcement of inclusion.
Yes, inclusion, of course, was one of the strategic priorities identified by the budget. But let me get the CBDT chairman into the conversation. And so, you've got an audience here who currently are perhaps doing their calculations, talking to their chartered accountants, whether they should switch from the old tax regime to the new tax regime or not. And I'm sure there's plenty of feedback that you've got overnight as well. But what is the pitch that you would like to make to the citizens, to taxpayers at this point in time, on why you believe it makes sense to move to the new tax regime?
See, the new tax regime is beneficial to the taxpayers in terms of the money which it is leaving in the hands of the taxpayer. The choice is with the taxpayer to decide whether to opt for the new regime, the proposed one, or the old one where they are as of now. Then there are issues regarding the compliances. The new regime makes it simpler to file the return of income. And as far as we in the tax administration are concerned, the evasion which we have noticed in certain cases is going to be taken care of because wrongful deductions have been claimed by the taxpayers. We have come across such cases in terms of Chapter 6A. So all these things will be taken care of. But as a citizen, as a taxpayer, the choice is with the taxpayer himself or herself to decide what way is beneficial to him or her and choose the option.
Well, yes, that option has been left with the taxpayer, but you also believe that this is, not believe, you do say that this is the new default tax regime. So I want to understand from you, as you were doing your scenario planning, of these 5 slabs that have been now put forward as far as the new regime are concerned, where do you believe you're likely to see people shift to? Within which bracket do you foresee people finding it more attractive to move to, especially cases where HRA, etc. is a factor? Do you believe that that will be a constraint on people making the shift?
We think that at every level the shift will take place. up to 7 lakh, and in case of salaried employees 7.5 lakh, the shift is definite. From 7.5 lakh income to 15 lakh of income, depending upon the deduction claimed by the person, he or she has to decide whether it is beneficial or not beneficial. And above 15 lakhs, our calculation shows that it will be beneficial to everyone. With the reduced surcharge, above 5 crore, definitely.
Okay, well, that's the pitch that's coming in from the CBDT chief himself to get people to move to the new tax regime. But Mr. Johri, let me come to you with the priorities as far as the CBIC is concerned. And the clear thrust as far as the budget is concerned is to try and bring down the cost of doing business and ensure that there is an improvement in the ease of doing business, and that is what the CBIC is also hoping to do. There has been a significant rationalization, as you pointed out, on the customs front as well. What's going to be the priority this year? What do you foresee as the big challenges as well for you?
So let me begin with customs. And the rate rationalization that you talked about is itself a very big step, because it's a very sharp cut in the number of rates. From 21 to 13 is a very sharp drop. And this is just the beginning of the process. So I think that is one theme that we'll take forward in future budgets in trying to control rate dispersion. On customs, the major challenge we are facing today is undervaluation of imports. We've been tackling it. In the last budget, there was a major announcement made with regard to some changes in the valuation provisions. That is yet to be implemented. The rules have been framed and we have the infrastructure ready for doing that. But in the coming year, we'll see the implementation of that provision. The other aspect which we've been dealing with in customs, more effectively we're trying to deal with it, is the misuse of free trade agreements. And to speak to that, we also made certain changes in law the year before last and in the preceding budgets. That is now settling down, and we'll be in a better position to assess in what manner free trade agreements are being misused, and we'll be able to come up with some policy response to that. On the GST side, although I must clarify, GST is not part of the budget. It is an ongoing process which emanates from GST Council decisions. But on the GST side, also, I think the emphasis is going to shift in 3 areas. One, in expanding the taxpayer base. So, although the taxpayer base has grown quite substantially since the time GST was introduced, when you compare it with other taxes, and that comparison is very often made quite naturally, you find that there is potential to increase the GST taxpayer base. So 1.4 crore is perhaps not good enough for a country of India's size, and we are trying to use technology to come at it, to do more data triangulation, so that we can at least assess for ourselves whether the potential for increasing the taxpayer base has been fully tapped or not. So that's one area, where there's definitely going to be a lot of work done in the coming year. The other 2 areas also speak to compliance, and I've been talking about how we need to ramp up our audits and scrutiny of returns. We've already got our act going on that, but we're going to work more collaboratively with the states, particularly in the area of audit. So those are the priorities that I can see for.
I want to get both you as well as the CBDT chairman to comment on this, and I think there was a question that was posed earlier to the Revenue Secretary as well as the Chief Economic Advisor on what you believe the gap is between where the tax base should be and where it currently is at. And you said that that is going to be a key focus area for you. So let me start by asking you, how large is the gap today on the back of what you are seeing, at least from the data that you've been able to collect via the GSTN?
We don't have we can just make intuitive comparisons. So if I were to compare the GST tax base with direct taxes, there's a huge gap. So they're doing about 7 to 8 crore taxpayers, we're doing just 1.4 crore. So that is one indicator that there is enough room, to tap. Also, intuitively about certain sectors, we're very clear that all the taxpayers who ought to be registered with GST are not there. For example, B2C supplies is one area that I'm just naming, for you. Likewise, import of services is another area where we feel that the gap has not been fully closed. So these are some of the indicators that I have, but of course I don't have concrete data to share with you to say that the gap is of the order of so many crore.
No, fair point. I appreciate that. CBDT Chief, let me ask you that question as well. How many are still evading the net?
See, we have been regularly pursuing this area, and though as CBIC chairman has stated, it's very difficult to gauge it. But if I take a yardstick of the number of taxpayers which are filing return of income every year, we are finding that like the rate of growth is around 5%. So every year we are finding around 5% new taxpayers are filing return of income. So with that thing, we are thinking that yes, that is the room available as of now. And if we pursue technology and what schemes have already been unfolded during the current financial year, the pace could be better, and that would be speaking about the gap between what the person is on the tax net and not.
Mr. Jain, let me come to you because, as I said, a large thrust on ease of doing business, reducing compliance, as well as encouraging private sector participation across a whole host of industries. I wanted to get your comments and your assessment on where things stand as far as a couple of government schemes are concerned. PLI, various schemes across 13 sectors in various, various forms of rollout at this point in time. Which are the ones that you feel satisfied with, where the progress you feel satisfied with? Where do you believe there is distance to be covered and work is underway to ensure that you push things along? Let me start by asking you about PLI before I get to Gati Shakti.
PLI, as you know, is one of the most important schemes for giving thrust to and creating global champions. The way we look at it, the sectors which we selected were basically based on whether there is a potential for a particular sector to create global champions in the country, whether this particular sector is of a strategic importance to the nation, or whether does it have a very high employment generation potential. So these are the three tests on which we actually consider a particular sector. But you'll have to understand the way PLI scheme operates. If in year one, I give a particular approval to a particular company, it has to make investments.
Yes.
Investment cycle takes time. So typically in most of the schemes, the investment period granted is 1 year or 2 years, depending on the choice of the company which wants to take the benefit of the PLI. So suppose it takes 1 year benefit. It wants to complete the investment in 1 year. So in the year 2, it will make the investment. Year 3 will be the base year of production.
Okay.
So year 4 will be the claim. So what has happened, some of the news items said that only 15% of the investment has taken place, only 3-4% of the money has been claimed. So let me put it straight. What has happened in most of these schemes, the investment is supposed to be completed over a period of 4 to 5 years. Say typically in a scheme, I say 15% of investment is the benchmark for year 1, 35% is year 2, 65% is year 3, 100% is year 4. So at the end of first year, how much would be the investment? 15%. If you put 15 in the denominator, it will be 100% performance. And if you put 100 in the denominator, it will be a 15% performance. So in the first year, the actual performance, if you put in the denominator, the target for the first year, it was 106%.
Okay.
Okay. Similarly, on the claims. So the schemes have actually started in different periods of time.
Yes.
So this year, we expect by March that out of 14 schemes, 7 would have got their first claims. Okay. Especially which were the early birds would make larger claims. So most of the schemes are by and large, there are certain minor hiccups which are there in implementation of any scheme. So concerned departments are continuously hand-holding all these investors, and I hope that, the way CEO Diti and I, we normally coordinate and review at our level, and then there's an empowered committee which is chaired by the cabinet secretary, that also reviews. Invariably, it's only minor hiccups, no major hiccups.
Ms. Iyer, let me get you to comment on that as well. Minor hiccups, no major hiccups. And thank you again, Mr. Jain, for explaining how the PLI scheme, the incentives and the claims work, because often that's not understood. And he's absolutely right in pointing out that there have been different rollout timelines across different schemes. We started with pharmaceuticals, and of course that was the very first PLI scheme to be rolled out. And then of course there was the COVID uncertainty as well. But in your assessment, what has been the biggest factors that are working as far as these 14 schemes are concerned?
I think first of all, Shireen, like
Sir, the
Anurag
mic.
said, I think the first factor is the selection of these 14 sectors. That itself has been very significant. And then of course, it's the industries coming forward, the very close monitoring, and I think the hand-holding and the facilitation for the industries, coordination with the state governments, getting the land acquisition, the electricity, the water up and running. And we do a very close monitoring. And so already about 800 crores, 800 worth of incentives have already been approved. We expect 3,000 to 4,000 crores before the end of March. And of course, the earlier sectors, pharma, mobiles, they're moving quicker. And I think others are learning from that process. So it's well underway, and we're very optimistic about how this program is going to transfer made in India and manufacturing in strategic sectors in India.
You know, one of the...
Sir, may I just
yes,
add
please, sir.
two things. Sir, what happens is the simplicity of the scheme is very important. The claim is dependent only on the production and nothing else. So that is very easy to verify with the GST, tax registrations, etc. So there are no administrative complexities involved in passing the claims. That is one of the biggest and important factors to my mind.
And you're absolutely right. That is a big factor, and certainly a big factor as far as industry is concerned. But Mr. Bhalla, let me come to you. One of the areas identified as a priority area has been the energy transition. This has been a budget that has identified the green focus, and an allocation of 35,000 crores, if my memory serves me right, has been made for the energy transition to OMCs, etc. You know, I want to understand from you, there's been a significant distance that's already been covered, especially when we talk about renewable energy. How confident are you feeling at this point in time as the world also makes this shift about India's own goals and aspirations?
Yeah, as you know, India has set a target of meeting 50% of its installed capacity, electricity installed capacity by non-fossil fuels by 2030. We have, right now we are at around 42%. Of the installed capacity, of the current installed capacity. Of course, looking at what our target is of how the energy would grow, we expect that we will need to add about 200 gigawatts or something of that sort of renewable capacity in the next 7 years. So it will be a spread of solar, wind, hydel, and bioenergy, and so on and so forth. Our expectation is, and what we are moving very confidently towards is, over the next 7 years, we will achieve 500 gigawatt. In fact, while we have committed, internationally committed to install 50% of our installed capacity from non-fossil, but Prime Minister has set a target of 500 gigawatt. So that's what we are aiming at, and we are very confident of achieving it.
What is the constraint or the challenge that you believe you're faced with in being able to get to that target? You know, Mr. Gadkari was here and he said, capital for me is not a problem. I have enough and more of it. How much of a factor is capital, and what are some of the other constraints that could get in the way of you being able to get to the 500 gigawatt target?
See, if you do the numbers, I mean, we have estimated that we will need about 23 lakh crore of investment in renewables for the next 7 years to reach the target. And of course, part of it would come from equity, part of it would come from, the balance would come from a combination of debt instruments as well as bond market. Equity, we are very confident that the private sector would be able to achieve. As you know, we are actually, the expansion of renewable capacity in the country has been spearheaded by the private sector. And the systems have been set are so robust, and there's so much of excitement when the new bids are invited, that I think there's no dearth of investments. In fact, a lot of international investment funding is coming in into the sector. So there will be, of course, financing will be one of the criteria, one of the factors which would lead us to reach it, but it would not be a constraint as far as we are concerned. Second is whether do we have the capacity to produce enough solar and wind equipment in the country. As you know, you've seen the last year what supply chain issues we faced, the prices which rocketed, not only in other sectors but also in renewables. But with, as Anurag just mentioned, the PLI scheme, for example, for solar, we have already done PLI 1, which we've already awarded it an integrated capacity of about 8.7 gigawatt of from polysilicon to solar module is what was awarded in PLI 1. As was mentioned, our capacity, in fact, I reviewed it today with the companies who were awarded, and it's absolutely on track. And with December 24, which is the 3-year timeline for our PLI, in fact, before that, we will have a fully integrated capacity of polysilicon to module produced in India as far as solar is concerned. And PLI 2 is now, we've called for bids. The bids are about to close, and that will add significant capacity to our solar manufacturing in India. In fact, looking at the numbers and looking at how these companies are actually adding capacity over and above what they have actually won or whatever they plan to, bid for in the PLI 2, they are setting up very high giga capacity factories. We will be producing enough solar manufacturing in India after about 3 years. It takes about 3 years for it to roll out. By year 2026, we are expecting that we will be producing enough solar manufacturing in India to not only cater to our requirement, but also to export. In wind for manufacturing, we are already producing, we have a capacity of about 12 gigawatt per year. And whereas we do not, at the moment, we have been adding about 1.5 gigawatt per year. Our target is to add about 8 gigawatt per year the next 7 years. So we have sufficient capacity. We might have to add, sometimes you do have to import some equipment when it's absolutely new, but it's then taken on by our Indian manufacturers and they can produce when the numbers grow. But so even in the supply chain, we will be resolving the issue which we faced last year.
Okay.
So so if you look at financing, you look at supply chain, you look at Indian private sector capacity, their excitement, I think we are well on track.
Well on track. That gives me a good segue to get all four of you gentlemen to talk about what we just heard there. One, of course, is the export aspiration across different sectors, and many of the PLI schemes have been identified on the back of the export opportunity as well. But the other is the aspect of cutting down on imports. And Mr. Jory, let me start by asking you about how you assess where things currently are on both these fronts, the export opportunity, the export potential, as well as what we've been able to do by way of import substitution, domestically manufacturing, localizing, etc., and where we can do more to enhance competitiveness.
So I think the budget this year addresses both those concerns from the customs tariff point of view. And so we've addressed the supply side issues by dropping tariffs on a large number of inputs, intermediates, parts, components, etc., different sectors, different industries, just so that the domestic availability is augmented and the value addition either deepens or happens in the country. There are several examples. If you go through the fine print of the budget, we've done it for mobile phones, we've done it for chemicals, we've done it for solar energy equipment, wind operated generators, and so on and so forth. On the export side, there are three sectors where there were very specific requests and provisions which we've made in the budget. One on marine exports. So it appears that one of the constraints which the domestic marine exporters were facing was the availability of shrimp feed. and there isn't adequate production of that. It's obviously needed for cultivation of shrimp, and we've given a duty exemption to those. Diamonds, you would have heard yesterday, the whole world is transitioning from natural to lab-grown diamonds, and the seeds that are required for growing lab-grown diamonds, a duty exemption is being given there so that we can utilize the cutting and polishing capacity more, and we can also produce lab-grown diamonds domestically, of which the production has begun, by the way, but it isn't, it can be ramped up. So those are 2 or 3 examples that I have on the import and export side. Of course, on the export side, you are aware that there are already a large number of export promotion schemes. There's drawback that we provide already to exporters. So I think the architecture is very much in place in a general policy sense.
There have been demands to expand the RODTEP scheme to include more sectors. Is that something that you're considering at this point in time?
Yes. So the RODTEP committee had looked at steel and chemicals, for example, and they have made their recommendations on what the appropriate rate should be, and that is currently under examination.
Currently under examination. Mr. Jain and Mr. Iyer, you were both in Davos trying to talk to investors about the potential of the India growth story. And let me start by asking you, Mr. Jain, in light of all of the measures that have been taken, what was the feedback that you got about India's competitiveness, specifically from a manufacturing standpoint? Is there anything more tangible, specific steps that investors have put on the table that the government is working on?
I think this will be a pretty longish answer if you can, but...
Is that a long list of demands that has been made?
No demands, the kind of work which has been done. So first and foremost, I would say the kind of structural reforms which have happened, the policy governance reforms which have happened, add on that the rule of law which we have in our country, add on to that demographic dividend, add on to that the best part, talented youth of the country. So this is what is going to drive the India's growth for next 25-30 years. The startup story we all know. So all this growth will be driven by, to our mind, knowledge, innovation and sustainability. And our startup ecosystem is doing fantastically well on all these. They are providing frugal and innovative solutions to all these problems. So if you are solving a problem for India's scale, you are actually solving global problems. Next 4 billion people in the world, they are looking to those solutions. Like India's public digital infrastructure. That's marvelous. I don't need to get into this. That is something which is absolutely unique. Nowhere else in the world you have something similar. We have based all our systems on presence-less, cashless, paperless kind of systems. Plus, it is based on open source, open platforms, open network. So what happens, any new startup or any new person who wants to start his business, he can plug into this existing ecosystem. Rest of the ecosystem is provided by the existing system. So therefore, the entry barriers have been lowered substantially, and that is what is fueling the growth. So this is one aspect. The kind of solutions, when you are talking to Secretary MNRE, next important thing which is going to happen. There are companies in India which started as a startup. Now they have really grown big, unicorns. The cost of 24/7 energy based on renewable energy, can you guess? 6 cents.
Wow.
This will excite the whole world. They have come out with designs. They are taking the renewable energy, solar, wind, everything, and using the pump storage with their improved efficiency design, which gives 81% efficiency. And they are giving firm power for 24/7. The real problem with renewable energy is this, that it is available only at certain time of the day. So they are spreading the risk by putting the solar and wind both. Wind comes in generally in the night, solar comes generally in the day, plus the storage. So even it out. So these are kind of solutions which are coming. You talk of anything, what India's startup ecosystem or young entrepreneurs are doing, it is pretty exciting. So it is a technological revolution which is happening in India. So most of the people are looking towards India as the real next place to invest in. I mean, you would have heard the stories from IMF that as the brightest.
Yes,
So
bright spot, yes.
So all those things are happening. So most of the people were excited in Davos. They were looking up to India to invest. And when we asked, there are very, very minor issues like FDI policy. India is one of the most open economies. The list where you cannot invest is not there, where you need government permission or you cannot invest 100%. That is just less than a page. So I can tell you with confidence that India's FDI policy is one of the most open FDI policies.
You know, you spoke a lot about startups, sir, and this is a subject close to my heart. I've been tracking it for 22 years now. So one of the big asks from the startup ecosystem is this business of linking the certification by the DPIIT that clears you to actually be qualified as a startup and then avail of the kind of benefits that the government is willing to put on the table. That process is taking very long. There are very few certified startups. When can we see that change?
That we have tried to improve the process. Earlier there was one committee which was taking it. So till about 3 months back, there are two major advantages which they are looking for.
Yeah.
There are 3 levels of certification. First level of certification is that you just file and it's automatical, you get it automatically. So there are about 88,000 startups which have been registered. So there's no problem in that.
Yeah.
Second registration is for angel tax, 56(2). There was some news items today that that has been done away. People are nervous about it.
No, it's just been parity. The non-residents have been brought.
No.
Yeah.
The problem came from somewhere, so therefore I would like to make that clear also on this count, that there is no change as far as startups are concerned. Anyone which has got a recognition of DPIIT for investing into that particular startup, the exemption under 56(2) continues.
Correct.
So that is there. So under that, more than 7,000 have got registered. There's absolutely no issue for 56(2). So first registration, which gives you benefits like GEM, startup, exemption from experience, net worth, turnover, criteria for participating in government tenders, that's available to everybody. This 7,000, I'm sure there is absolutely no hiccup. When you apply, you get it automatically. So it is only that the rest of the people have not gone to that stage where they want angel investors to come in or whatever. The last one, which was for 80 IAC.
Yeah.
So by very nature also, 80 IAC is something which not many people apply because they have to grow big before they apply.
Right.
But still our process was slow, and that was a complaint. Against about 2,500 applications, only 400 odd had been cleared. So what we did, we have now created 10 parallel boards to improve the speed. So in the matter of last 2 months, the approvals have gone up from 400 odd to about 1,200. And hopefully by March or April, we would finish the 100% pendency because we have multiplied our force by 10 times.
10 times, well.
And by taking the benefit of the experts in the ecosystem.
Right.
So we have divided the work into 2 parts. One, people who look at the innovation part, one who look at the genuineness of the company. Both the inputs come, our committee automatically approves it.
Well, that's good news, and that certainly is going to be a relief to many who are waiting for that clearance. But Mr. Iyer, you know, the